It was wartime. Pearl Harbor had been attacked. 5 brothers from Waterloo, Iowa, George, Frank, Joe, Matt, and Al Sullivan, enlisted together in the U.S. Navy on the 3rd of January 1942, and they insisted that they serve together. And so all 5 brothers were assigned to the light cruiser USS Juno. 10 months later, early in the morning of November 13th, 1942, during the naval battle of Guadalcanal, the Juno was struck by a torpedo and quickly sank. 10 survived. None of the 5 Sullivan brothers was among them. No word of this reached the Sullivan home back in Iowa. Letters simply stopped arriving, and the Sullivan brothers' parents became very worried. Many tears were shed in that home that Christmas. But the Navy did not want to reveal that the Juno had been lost. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan were not notified of the tragedy until 2 months later, on January 12, 1943. That morning, the boy's father was preparing to go to work when 3 men in uniform approached his front door. "I have some news about your boys," the naval officer said. "Which one?" asked the father. "I'm sorry," the officer replied. "All 5. We can only imagine the tears in that household as the truth sank into the hearts of those parents that all 5 of their boys had died. The Pope, Pius XII, was profoundly moved at this family's loss. A true father to all, he sincerely grieved the loss of every life on all sides of the war. Now he sent a heartfelt personal letter to the parents of these 5 brothers, together with a silver religious medal and rosary. What father, what mother would not be moved at the sight of these parents weeping over the loss of their children? At such a time, all differences in politics, nationality, or religion are forgotten, and we suddenly and instinctively know from the depths of our being that we are one family, the human family, the family of God. As Henry David Thoreau put it, all are children, and of one family. The same tale sends them all to bed and wakes them up in the morning. Years later, on another Christmas day, another father, another pope, wept for his children. Pope Francis, in his Urbi et Orbi message, grieved at the plight of the suffering and dying children of the world, children of every religion and race and nationality, the vast numbers of children, victims of violence, objects of trade and trafficking, children forced to become soldiers, children displaced by war and persecution, abused and taken advantage of before our very eyes and our complicit silence. So many abused children, those infants massacred in bomb attacks in the very place where the Son of God was born. Even today, the Pope lamented, their impotent silence cries out under the sword of so many Herods. On their blood stands the shadow of contemporary Herods. Truly, there are so many tears this Christmas, together with the tears of the infant Jesus. Here stands a man conscious of his role as a father in the family of God, but conscious also of his role as child of this same family and brother to all its members without distinction. Here stands someone who recognizes no walls of division between religions or races, supremely aware that we are all children of the same God, members of the one family. History, as well as contemporary news, provides us countless images of human beings behaving towards each other as though we were not sisters and brothers. And disgracefully, it has all too often been religious fundamentalism that is to blame. That same spirit of bigotry which in the good old days gave life to the Inquisitions, Crusades, heretic burnings, witch hunts, conversions by the sword, conquistas, forced expulsions, and bloody religious wars, lives on today in Boko Haram, ISIS, the Taliban. It lives on in ethnic cleansing, persecution, genocides, in settlements, in cults, in kidnappings and murders, in hatred of Jews, in hatred of Muslims, in hatred of Christians, in hatred between Christians, between Muslims, between Jews. It lives on wherever there is hatred and division. It lives on wherever human beings have stopped believing in the all-embracing family of God. Well might the Holy Father weep. The family is in crisis, and it is not because of any rethinking of the institution of marriage. The human family is in crisis because humanity has lost sight of the truth that we are all, every one of us, children of the same God, and therefore sisters and brothers to one another. We have lost sight of the truth proclaimed by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. God's dream is that you and I and all of us will realize that we are family, that we are made for togetherness, for goodness, and for compassion. In God's family there are no outsiders, no enemies. The God who existed before any religion counts on you to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. When in 1964, Pope Paul VI and the Patriarch of Constantinople embraced, removing the absurd mutual excommunications that had divided the Eastern Church from the Western Church for 900 years, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When in 1965, the Second Vatican Council recognized humanity's oneness and the beauty in all religions, and particularly celebrated our special relationship to the Muslim and Jewish religions, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When Pope John Paul II made a surprise visit to the Rome synagogue, a move repeated by Pope Benedict, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When Benedict XVI, as his very first official act as Pope, wrote a letter to Rome's Jewish community, and Pope Francis did the same just hours after his election, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When in 1986, 1993, and 2002, John Paul II called together leaders of all the world's religions to come together in Assisi in a World Day of Prayer for Peace, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When in 2001, in the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, John Paul II called upon Christians and Muslims to be partners and not adversaries, to experience brotherhood and friendship, when he urged mutual forgiveness, respect, and understanding between the two religions, and condemned religious fundamentalism on any side. We caught a glimpse of the family of God. When in 2006, Pope Benedict, removing his shoes, visited Istanbul's Blue Mosque, turned towards Mecca and prayed with the Grand Mufti, and when several years later Pope Francis did the same, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When Mother Teresa ministered selflessly and tirelessly to the dying, destitute Hindus, Muslims, and Buddhists of India with no other agenda than to love, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When in Bulgaria the local church burned down and the neighboring mosque raised the funds to help their Christian brothers and sisters rebuild, we caught a glimpse of the family of God. When Francis, at his first Holy Thursday Mass as Pope, washed the feet of Muslim women, when he visited the suffering refugees of all faiths in Lampedusa, when he spontaneously stopped to pray for the suffering Palestinian people at the monstrous dividing wall in Jerusalem, when he called the Israeli and Palestinian heads of state to pray together at the Vatican, when he convoked in Rome an evening of prayer and fasting for Syria, inspiring the Grand Mufti to direct all his followers to pray in conscious communion with the Holy Father, we caught a very visible glimpse of the family of God. What is this family? What is any family? The actor from the old television series MASH, my old friend David Ogden Stiers, used to say, family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. No one. So many of God's children continue to be left behind and forgotten. But the Holy Father concludes that Christmas speech with an impassioned plea. May the power of the Christ, which brings freedom and service, be felt in the countless hearts afflicted by war, persecution, and slavery. May this divine power, by its very meekness, take away the hardness of heart of so many men and women immersed in selfishness and apathy. Take away the globalization of indifference. May his redeeming strength transform arms into plowshares, destruction into creativity, hatred into love and tenderness. Then we will be able to cry out with joy, our eyes have seen your salvation. And this, my sisters and brothers, is the human family as it could be. This is the family of God.